Welcome to Let's Talk Music, where the goal is to provide insights into the world of music from people that have been successful in that world. Today's guest is Professor Tim Ishii, who, in addition to being a fantastic saxophone player with a passion for jazz big bands, he's been the director of jazz studies at the University of Texas Arlington since 2004. Tim is also an artist clinician for Con Selmer and D'Addario. Having more than 3 decades of college teaching experience and an even longer career as a working musician, Tim shares in this interview the experiences that led him into the world of music and eventually a lengthy and successful career as a music educator. Now, let's talk music. All right, Tim, thank you so much for joining Let's Talk Music. It's really good to see your face again. Not so long ago, we were in San Antonio at the Texas Music Educators Association. It was great seeing you there. You had a group there, a couple of groups there, probably, right?
Yeah, I've had my jazz orchestra from UT Arlington there a couple times. Once in 2009, and then just last year.
Fantastic. So let's talk back beginnings. Go back to when you were little, Tim, in Seattle. What were your earliest musical memories? Did you grow up in a musical family? And what led you to make the decision, I want to major in music and I want to go to Texas to do it?
Well, I used to tell my mom this. My earliest musical memory was is the gazebo scene from The Sound of Music. I'm
Okay.
16 going on 17, and I remember that image of the Liesel running around and jumping from bench to bench. I don't, and when I told that to my mom, she goes, "Wow, you were less than 2 years old." And she was surprised that I could remember that. So that's like my very earliest ever image of associating something with music. And then I was all, according to my mother, I was always singing to the radio, uh, songs and things like that. And I used to love this song called "Love Is Blue," uh,
Okay.
and then there was another one called "Windy," who's peeking out from under.
Yeah.
So all these kind of pop songs, in my mind, as I recall, being, probably when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Um, and so those are my very earliest memories. But then I didn't really. I guess you could say my family was kind of musical. My parents weren't really avid musicians. I mean, I think they had taken a few. They told me they had taken a few piano lessons when they were young, but nothing extensive. And they didn't play or anything, but they were music lovers.
Okay.
And I always remember them whenever like a Frank Sinatra special came on TV or something like that. They were always like, "Okay, kids, clear out. We're going to watch this concert on TV." And then my dad had he had a small collection of probably about 100 jazz records.
Okay.
So he liked jazz, like when he was in college and things, and so he had collected some records over the years, a little bit of everything. Duke Ellington. He had a Coltrane record. He had a couple Charlie Parker records, some Cannonball, Miles Davis, Dave Brubeck.
It's a good collection.
A little bit of, so he had some big band stuff like Woody Herman. Never, he didn't have Stan Kenton though, which was interesting
Okay.
to me. Um, Count Basie, I said, and so as I started to get interested in music, and I picked up the saxophone because my sister, older than me, she played clarinet. And unbeknownst to me, she secretly liked the saxophone. So she convinced me that the instrument that I should pick out to play when I was like in the 5th grade should be the saxophone. She goes, Scotty Fitzgerald, he was the cool kid on the block. He plays saxophone. So my sister knew that she had played long enough to know some of the fingerings were similar, right? And that she'd be able to play it. So, here, we went off to the music store, and probably if I had not been sick on the day that they came around and demonstrated all the instruments, I probably would have picked trumpet because all my buddies picked trumpet.
Okay.
So I was just told that I was supposed to go to the store and pick an instrument out, and I went, and my sister convinced me I should play saxophone. So of course
Amazing.
they got me an alto, and got home, and she helped me put it together.
What kind was it? Just curious.
It was a student model Con.
My first was a Boozy and Hawks alto that was my dad's from the early 50s. We called it
Awesome.
the Junkophone. It wasn't even a con.
Well, and I picked the con because it was one color. It was all gold. And,
Ah,
and I had my choice between a con and a king. And the king was two-tone, but I didn't like that for some reason. I wanted the whole shiny light, the bright gold one. So I
yeah.
picked
So,
and so I get home and she teaches me like the C scale, where to put my hands and just pick your fingers up and so within a matter of just a few minutes I was already picking tunes out like Mary Had a Little
so
Lamb.
it was the ear was there. It wasn't a struggle. It was natural.
No, that was
Awesome.
pretty easy. So that's how I started. I went through the grade school program and junior high, and when I was in ninth grade, our ninth grade was at the junior high still. So but the high
Same for
school band
me.
came up to the junior high to recruit kids for the jazz band, and
Yeah.
so I played in a little after school jazz band, and they didn't. He had the high school kids working with us on some tunes, and I don't even. They weren't really even like they weren't like jazz standards. They were just like some kind of like Hal Leonard Sound Power series
Okay.
things that kind of
Yeah.
sound jazzy, and but we had to improvise even though they didn't know what to tell us what to play. So I was just improvising by ear
Wow.
at that point, and but I thought that was cool. Then along about this time, my dad sees my interest in jazz and he starts introducing me to some of these records that he has, and I fell in love with the Glenn Miller band because I loved the sound of that saxophone section in the mood, that full saxophone section.
Yeah.
I
All the
thought
harmonies. Yeah.
that sonority, and I thought I couldn't get enough of that,
Yeah.
So then of course Count Basie came along, and I was listening to Count Basie records, and then I began to like Paul Desmond, and then Cannonball, and then Charlie Parker. I thought Charlie Parker was a little frenetic, and until for some reason they went to a music store for a year later for Christmas or something when I was in high school and said they wanted to buy me something for music, and the guy goes, "Hey, this book just came out a year ago or so," and it was the Omni book.
Hmm.
And so then when I could follow along, you know,
Yep.
the music and the recording, then I was like really super like blown away by it, impressed, and so I started to
So
try.
like sixth or seventh grade. I was doing more junior
No,
high
no,
school,
no,
ninth.
no. This
Ninth.
is high
Okay.
school. This is high school. So uh played in the high school jazz band and just love that's what that was. I just love that, right? And started taking lessons, saxophone lessons. I I used to have to go take saxophone lessons when my sister took from a guy across town. He was the other high school, the band director, Jim Blake, and he was a clarinetist and he played saxophone too. And so my mom would go make me go take the lesson when my sister had to miss because she was on the volleyball team.
Okay.
Goes, "We're not wasting that money. Get in the car. You're going." you know? And so she'd haul me over there and I'd be like, "Well, what am I doing?" And this guy's teaching me something sight reading, and it's just like, "What do I have to?" And then eventually I started taking lessons with him, and he really helped me a lot. And I went through the whole Rubank system, all the
Yeah.
books, and systematically he was like that. And um he taught me how to swing a little bit. He had some easy jazz etude books. It wasn't the Niehaus books. I went then when he said, "Hey, I'm going to send you on to this other guy. He's the better teacher in town, and he's teaching all the good people." And um, you remember Tamara Schultz
Yeah.
or Tamara Danielson, now married to Pear. Well,
Right.
she went to the great Kent Meridian High School, which was across the valley from me, and we'd go over and hear their concerts because they were so awesome.
Huh.
And so I started taking with a gentleman named John, or John. We called him Johnny Jessen, and that's who everybody went to, including Kenny Gorlick or Kenny G.
Okay.
Johnny Jessen. We're all
Same teacher.
yeah. But um so he taught me a lot, including classical saxophone. Like he taught me the concertos.
The furlings? Did he break the furlings or just etudes? What was he
Well,
doing?
we mostly worked out of the close A
Okay.
etude, and then he taught me how to arpeggiate, seventh chords and
Mm, so
triads and
important. Yeah.
major, minor, and doing them in fourths and things like that. Worked out at close A. He taught me, classical literature, and then we started working out of the knee house
Hmm.
etudes. Taught me a little bit about jazz articulation. Never taught me about how to improvise. He didn't do that, So I kind of improvisation. I admittedly just I obviously I went to North Texas and studied the jazz theory and all that stuff, but first and foremost, I consider myself an ear player.
Were you playing along with big band records or solo albums, or did you get any Abersols in high school?
I remember along with that Omni book, my parents bought me the Charlie Parker Abersol. Okay.
Fantastic.
My band director had a few Abersols in the band hall. I remember one was the Duke Ellington one, playing over those standards, but I got the Charlie Parker one. Of course, that was a lot different. And I didn't know how to read chord changes. I just knew that the letter was the root of the tonality.
Yeah.
So I would play by ear, listen to Charlie Parker play, and then play by ear and try to kind of imitate him, and then when I got bored, I got a tenor saxophone, so I pick up a tenor or my soprano, and so that it would change the key.
Here you go. I can transpose. Let me get by the horn real quick.
Well, I couldn't transpose, but I was just like, oh, it's making me play in a different
Different
key.
key, right? Right.
I got tired of listening to myself play the same thing over and over in other keys.
That's
So
wild how similar our earlier saxophone careers were. Started the same age, got into Parker. I got the Omni book early on. I did the House once. I didn't have a lot of big band records. I had a couple, obviously, based on our history together. But I got the Super Sax Plays Bird album.
oh yeah,
And
yeah.
that's almost all those songs are in the Omni book. So I got big band and Parker at the same time.
Right.
I would play the heck out of that. I still have that vinyl in my cabinet. So you're playing, you're improvising by ear. You're an ear player. You got big band records. You got etudes. You're getting your technique. How did you find North Texas?
Well, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and um, for some reason, going out of state just didn't seem like it wasn't
I
even
leave. Yeah.
realm of possibility. My sister went to the U and before me, and she was in music, and so that was just going to be natural. And then Johnny Jessen, my teacher, he got hired as the adjunct professor of saxophone at the University of Washington my freshman year.
Hmm.
So I just went. It was going to be perfect, right? I'm going to study with Johnny Jessen. They didn't have a real teacher of saxophone up until that point. That was like 1981. Okay. So I went to the University of Washington, and I played lead alto in the second jazz band. I made lead alto, and then and I played in the wind symphony, principal alto. So after a year, Johnny says to me, he goes, "You have to get out of here." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You have to leave." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, you're already playing principal alto in the wind symphony, the wind ensemble." He goes, "You're just you're not challenged enough." And that next fall of my sophomore year, when I was there, I had made second alto in the top jazz band, and there was a guy named Jerry Knudsen playing lead, and he was a DMA clarinet student, and he was a really good saxophone player, but he was already seeing like, well, when these guys are gone, there's nobody else here. He goes, "You just need to go."
Hmm.
And you need to go. He goes, "You need to go to North Texas State and see where you stack up." And that's where Tammy Schultz went. Back then, her name was Tammy Schultz, and there was another couple other very fine saxophonists that came down to North Texas. One was a guy named Carl Lampman.
Hmm.
He played in the 1 o'clock, and tenor saxophonist. And then there was another woman. Her name was Robin Wiley, and Robin she had I think she had an unusual time at North Texas because when she came, she was kind of like me. She said she transferred in the middle of the year. I think she kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. And I always thought that, she should have made a much higher lab band because she was a really good player and a really good improviser and very melodic. But she was also a really great singer and a jazz and pop singer, and she started singing in all these top 40 bands in Dallas and making money. She actually ruined her voice. She got nodes.
Oh,
Then she kind of quit, and then kind of I lost track of her. And the next thing I know, she's like vocal coach to the stars.
wow.
She's like coaching like guys like Backstreet Boys or NSYNC and groups, those kind of boy band things
Back
that
in the
were
day.
really
Wow.
hot in the 90s. And she was like doing that. And then uh I don't know how many years ago it is, Paul, maybe almost 10 years ago. I learned from Jeff Coffin and Tammy that she had gotten cancer and she
Mm.
passed. So that was pretty sad. But she was another great saxophonist that Johnny Jessen taught. And so I followed in their footsteps, and he goes, you have to get out of here. And I applied to North Texas and I got accepted.
Yep.
And away I went.
So let's talk about college then. So
Okay.
you get there with some experience. What band did you make when you first got there?
I didn't make a band.
Nor did
I
I.
I made North Texas, as you know, had 9 lab bands, and then they had what were called reading bands.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the reading bands met only Tuesdays and Thursdays, and so there were 4 reading bands, and I was in the last one. I made the last one. I was playing lead alto in the last reading band, and our buddy Will Campbell, who later on went out on the road with Harry Connick Jr. He was playing Barry
Huh.
in that
I didn't
band.
know that about Will
That's
because
the first
the first band I made was Barry on Barry. I guess Professor Riggs saw me and said he's a big guy, he can hold the horn because I didn't make
hold
that
the
an alto,
Barry.
man.
But that in that 4th reading band, I mean, Will was the last guy. I mean, after that,
Yep.
he didn't make anything, and
So
there were a lot of guys that didn't make anything.
So this is a story I've told a lot, and so I did not know that about you. I thought you made a band when you got there. For those watching, Tim and I were both at North Texas at the same time. When I tell folks, when you get to North Texas, most of the guys that arrive, they were the big fish in their small pond at home. They were really good in their region, their area. They were all state, all region type folks in classical or jazz. And so they probably felt pretty good about themselves. And I know I felt good about myself coming in to North Texas. And when you go through the audition, for me, it was a new concept and reading. I was a good reader. I thought I would do well. But when the papers go up on the board, and then I'm like, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? Wrong sheet over here. And I'm on a reading band. And like, so that moment is actually a pretty important moment in a lot of players' lives because you can look at that and say, man, I made a reading band. Now you can think, I got to work hard or I got to change majors. Now, I saw it right away and said, man, I got to work hard. There was no second thought about that. I think some of the folks who went to school with might have been better off changing majors. But so when that happened, you just thought, okay, I got to work hard. There was no questioning your decision to major in music at North Texas.
Well, I thought for a second, like, what the heck have I done?
Same exact thing.
Because, like you said, not only that, I went, I had some experience. I'd been in college for almost a year and a half. And I was thinking to myself, well, I was in the top band at University of Washington,
Yep.
and in high school, I made the all-state concert band.
Yep.
In addition to that, I made the all Northwest concert band, and that's another story.
And I was doing the same thing on the East Coast. I was all state, all New England. Exactly.
There's a few guys who were at North Texas who we later became really good friends that were in those bands. But I went after I didn't make a lab band. I was there and I was at the bottom, and barely on the list. And then I took my schedule up to Professor Riggs's door, his office, because I didn't know that when they signed you up, they put everybody in his section and then they just divided them out afterwards, right? And so I thought, oh well, I'm going to be studying with the props, so that's a good thing. Knock, 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 and he was like, hello. And I said, oh, Mr. Riggs, I brought you my course schedule so that we could schedule a lesson time. He goes, oh, no, we'll tell you section, who you study with on Monday at the saxophone meeting. Be there,
At
lab,
departmentals, yeah.
lab band east at, like what, 3 o'clock on
Yeah.
Monday. I said, okay, see ya, slam.
You were one of 230 sax makers at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we get there. Obviously, we get to the meeting, big lab band meeting. All these, there's 100 saxophonists crowded in this room, and he's reading out the names of who goes with what TF. And of course, I'm not on his list, right? I'm with some guy named Tom Beers, who
Oh,
turned out to be fantastic. But after that, I walked outside and I thought, what have I done?
yeah.
I'm not.
It's a shock.
I don't know anybody here. I'm not. What's happening? What have I done? Maybe I just should have been. I should have stayed put, and I'd be, doing fine at Washington. But I didn't know what else to do, so I just said, okay, well, just put your head down and let's go. Let's practice and let's see what happens. And so that's exactly what I did. And Tom Beers was really helpful to me. I remember, I came to one of my first lessons. He goes, well, tell me about yourself? And I said, well, I played all these concertos and, what I thought was playing concertos, right? As a high schooler. And he goes, well, hold on. He goes, just here's what you need to do. And he laid out the whole formula. Like, you need to play this piece, this Bach sonata, Handel sonata, this piece by Paul Maurice, this Tableau de Provence, a couple moves of that. And you need to get out on saxophone recital lab and play a couple so that the profs see you. And then at the end of the semester, when you play your jury, I'll recommend to them that they should, one of them should take you. And of course, Deborah Rickmeyer became my teacher for many years, and that was a really great experience for me. And because I got the experience of working with Jim Riggs in lab bands,
Yeah.
eventually. But that's how it started. And then I auditioned. I made the 9 o'clock lab band. So I thought, okay, I made a lab band. I'm making progress. Then I made the 7. And then I moved down to the 8, and I thought, back to the drawing, back to work. And I started, and then I jumped up to the 5 o'clock, which is a pretty good leap. And then the next year I made the 3 o'clock for 2 weeks. And Riggs came to the 3 o'clock and said, are you available tomorrow at 2 o'clock? And I said, yes, sir. And so I went to the 2 o'clock the next day, and I sat in. And after that, he goes, are you available can you come at 2 o'clock every day? I said, yes, sir.
Yeah.
He goes, okay, you're in the 2 o'clock now.
Wow.
And I made the 2 o'clock that semester, and Dave Pietro was the lead alto player.
That's right. Dave was in the 2 before the 1. Well, no,
right.
I think Dave shuffled because, yeah, I was Dave's roommate for his first 2 years.
Yeah. That's when I started meeting you and talking to you more. And then the next semester, I think Dave moved up to the 1, and a new guy came to town. His name is Pat Mallinger.
Oh, yeah.
Pat Mallinger. Great, phenomenal player. And so he got lead in the 2, and so I played second in the 2 under Pat Mallinger. So I got to play second alto to 2 just unbelievably
great guys. Yeah, that's the great thing about going to a school as competitive. I mean, back in the 80s, my teacher, Phil DeLibero in Connecticut, he called it the factory. He said they just crank out amazing saxophone players. You're going to learn how to read, going to know how to improvise, learn how to do gigs. You're going to learn a lot about saxophone. And there's so many great guys. In my path, I came in reading band, shock and awe. Oh my God, what do I do? And then made the 6 on Barry, and then went to the 4 on alto. And that was a weird semester because actually Will was below me that semester. It was, how auditions were. It was strange how one day made it, and every day is an audition, as the paper says. 6, 4, 5 with Andy Axelrad.
Yeah.
When I was in the 4 with some spare named Brad Lely. He was okay. He's not a professor of saxophone. Former bassy and Harry Connick lead player, now running the saxophone program in North Texas. He was okay. Yeah. And then I was in the 2 o'clock forever with you. Man, we had a lot of fun in that band together.
Yeah. That was my second stint in the 2 o'clock, because I then went down to the 4. I started working nights to put myself through school, and I was working from 11 at night till 7 in the morning on campus, and then going to school full time. and then so I I wasn't doing as well, so I got bumped down to the four, and that was just like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, you know. But I was in there for like 2 semesters. So
Those
then
are
I
damn good bands, though. Still,
they were all good, you know,
yeah.
and so then the next fall after being in the four, I audition and I make the three, right? And 2 weeks later, Riggs comes to the three. It's like deja vu.
Yeah, okay.
Riggs comes to the 2 o'clock. Hey, can you come tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Yes, sir. Show up. Okay. Do you have this available every day? Yes, sir. Okay, you're in the 2 o'clock now. And I think that's when you played lead.
Yeah, for a while.
We,
Then we called
well, we were
and then he
both
called it
in
split
there.
lead. Yeah.
Yeah. So we split lead in there, and then after that, uh,
You
I
eventually got to
did
the 1 o'clock.
I did eventually make the 1 o'clock, but I auditioned on Barry, and then after, but then it was like reverse. It was kind of like all these scenarios. I played in the 1 o'clock second alto, and I was in there for 2 weeks, and then Neil moved me out. He moved me down.
Ooh, ouch. Who was
But
playing lead with you then? Was that
that
Carolyn or
was
was that Brad?
Carolyn
Okay.
Cape,
Yeah.
and so I got moved out of the one and down to the two, which was like, gut wrencher,
Yeah.
kicking gut, but I got to play in the two again.
Yeah. Well, working with Professor Riggs is
Yeah,
fantastic. You're
so
going to get little great lessons
I,
there.
so I did that, and then finally, and at that point, it was Jeff Coffin who was playing Barry in the one,
Yeah.
and he graduated mid-year, and so I thought to myself, you know what, I just got to be in that band one semester. So
Yeah.
I went and I auditioned. I called Riggs. I said, I'm going to audition on Barry. Go for it.
You go.
So I got a Barry and I got a mouthpiece from somebody I borrowed, and I auditioned, and yeah, they put me in the 1 o'clock, and I played in a lab. I was on lab 90, I think.
Yeah, I thought about that. We had Glenn Coster there. We had Chris Carlock there. It was just so getting back kind of to the educational aspect, you had to adjust and adapt. Every semester was different. There's a sign on the board at North Texas. Every day is an audition, so your
Sure.
seat is not guaranteed. I mean, there are moves mid-semester.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
first couple of weeks were crazy as Slater and Riggs were kind of trying different balances, looking for different sounds.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
so college was very, very competitive, but you had to be able to adapt. You didn't whine or complain when something happened. You recognize I've got to get better. So you work hard. And then what about thinking about the people watching, the high school kids that are thinking about it, folks that are in college now, doubling. Did you double before college, or did you learn that in college, flute and clarinet?
I barely played flute. I remember in high
I still
school,
barely play flute.
I got a little bit. I got a student model Gemeinhardt, and we had a couple pieces that had some flute parts. And I was dating this girl. She actually was the flute player at school, and she taught me a couple little things and how to make a sound and an embouchure. So I
You
kind
had
of
to do it. The book required it.
just figured out. I just figured it out. I wasn't good, but I mean, and I didn't start doubling on clarinet until I got to college, and we just had to.
Yeah, so it's in the book. Thank you, Duke Ellington and Stan Kenton, and
Yeah, it wasn't if you were going to have to play clarinet, it was just when.
yeah, you had to get one. You had to learn.
Yeah, you're at some point you're going to get called for a gig, and because back then, Paul, even in the mid to late 80s and early mid 90s, I mean, there are still lots of dance bands in Dallas, society bands and dance
Yeah,
band. And so my up until for the first 15 years out of college, I was mainly a section player. I was being called to play lead alto or in the section, and for dance bands, we're still, that was the bulk of the work and that I was getting. And there'd be a couple clarinet parts or flute parts in there. So you always took your alto and your flute and your clarinet.
yeah, you had your tri-pack stand ready to go.
Yep.
So we're approaching the top of the hour. Are you good to go longer? Or need to run?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do that. Let's keep going. I appreciate that, Tim. Thanks for flexibility. So, and this is fun. You bring back a whole bunch of memories. So you were doing all the big band gigs. I live with Dave, who was doing all the big band gigs, so I didn't get crap for gigs. I got called for pop bands eventually, but and then of course there was the Dallas Jazz Orchestra. There's the
Uh-huh.
collection where you and I played later on.
Yep.
A whole bunch. What a fun band that was. I missed that a lot. So you're gigging in college. You're working at night to pay for college later on. You're doing music, but then you also have the academics. Did you ever, and this is the last question about college before we go on to life after, did you ever think about quitting because it was too much? Did it always work out? Did you freak out, stress out because of grades or other classes? Because music theory was hard, music history was hard. We had the other requirements, the English and history, et cetera, we had to do. Did you ever think of quitting, or was that not an option?
No, I don't know why it never crossed my mind. I think it
Same.
was probably because I felt like I wasn't good at anything else.
And you committed. You went from West Coast to Texas. You might as well finish it out.
Yeah, I was just there, just do it, put your head down. And I wasn't, truthfully, looking back, I wish I would have hung out way more like with 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 the jazz guys. But for some reason, the way I was brought up is like, you don't skip class. You go to class, you do your
Yeah,
homework,
same way.
and so I know a lot of guys were out jamming and having sessions and things like that, and but it wasn't. It would have been frowned upon in my family if I did poorly in the
Academically, yeah. Well, that's good. So you were dedicated, and all you kids out there, do your homework, go to class.
It's important. Looking back, I mean, yes, obviously there's only so many hours in a day, but pursuing those, you know, being able to string a few sentences together and write, is
Yeah.
is important. And always,
And these days, we were talking about this when I saw you last month. It's harder to find actual gigs today. There's just not as many opportunities out there, not as many bands, orchestras, things of
yeah.
that sort. So coming out of college with a sound education and a degree is very, very important. Funny sidebar, after about a decade after college or so, I was working in corporate America between gigs, and I'd worked a couple of years at a pretty famous accounting firm and as a contractor. And I said, I'd like to be hired on as an employee. My work is good. Can we make that happen? And the vice president looked at me and said, Paul, I'd love to hire you. And this is 1990, 91, but you've got a music degree on your resume. You might as well have a criminal record. I will
Oh,
never forget that because that was verbatim.
man.
And this was late 80s, early 90s, where they were focusing on math skills. Because in the 80s, it was like creative, go get the creative folks. In the 90s, they're like, no, we need to, it was Wall Street, that whole concept. And as they said, you've got a music degree, which is like a criminal record in our view. And that's what led me to go to grad school. Separate conversation there. But for college students today, if you're choosing to major in music, understand what your opportunities are, be thinking of where you might take this degree. You're not going to be a pop star. That's like going to college in music thinking you're going to be a pop star is like going to college for sports thinking you're going to make the NFL or the NBA. That's very, very slight odds. So you've got to do well in college, musically and academically, and get that degree, because a degree is something in the business world and the music world as well. So when you got done with college, were you teaching lessons during college and after college? How did you get to your first college job as a
Well,
professor?
I was very fortunate at North Texas when I applied for grad school, and I did my degrees kind of sort of backwards. Like I did my undergraduate in jazz studies,
Mm-hmm.
which is a performance degree, and then I thought to myself, well, okay, I'm around guys like Dave Pietro and Pat Mallinger
Bradley
and
Lee. And
yeah, Shelley Carroll and you name it. You being zillions of phenomenal players, and the whole thing was like, well, I'm going to go to LA or I'm going to New York,
mm-hmm.
right? And that just for some reason I just wasn't going to be me.
I was exactly the same. I didn't have that drive to go to one of those two cities.
Well, and I just didn't have the confidence in my abilities, and looking back later on, I thought, well, maybe if I would have gone there and got jumped in there and then did the whole process and
Huh.
worked and I practiced and make the hang, and I would have developed and probably could have done okay. But anyway, so I thought, well, maybe I've always been interested in the teaching field. When I was in high school, I taught some beginner lessons and I always enjoyed doing that. And I felt like I got results and things like that. So I approached Deborah Rickmar and I said, what would you think about me coming to graduate school? And my thinking was at first I was just going to go get a teaching certificate. I was going to stay in school and get a music ed degree, a double major, right? I thought, I could teach high school, So I started taking all these education classes, and they weren't interesting. I could say something, but I'll just say they weren't interesting me. They weren't interesting to me. I didn't enjoy it. And um, some of them were, but most of them weren't. And then I realized it would take me like I had, including student teaching, I had another like 40 or 50 hours,
Well, yeah.
a lot. So I decided I thought, well, what if I got a master's degree? Because they're only like 32 or 34 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow, I could do. So I went to Deborah and I said, hey, what would you think about me doing a master's in classical saxophone? She goes, I think that'd be great, because my thinking then, and it could have been slightly naive, but I thought, well, if I get a master's, I can teach in college.
Hmm.
So that gives me that credential. So that's what I did. And I was very, very fortunate, because straight out of my master's at UNT, um, I got an ad. Well, Deborah left to go teach at University of Illinois, and um, they didn't find a replacement for her position right away. So that next year, Jim Riggs called me and said, "Would you want to come teach adjunct at North Texas?" So straight out of my graduate degree, the next fall I was teaching.
Wow. So it's just kind of things lined up good for you.
Yeah, and also I got a teaching a part-time teaching gig at a small private college in Fort Worth called Texas Wesleyan, and I became the adjunct teacher of saxophone at UT Arlington, where I am now. So straight out of grad school, I had 3 adjunct positions, one being North Texas, and so for that year, it was a lot of driving,
Driving all over the Metroplex. My
but
goodness.
but it was really great. And then a year after that, Wesleyan hired me full-time, non-tenure track, but it was full-time. It had benefits. It wasn't very high salary, but I took it because I knew that was the stepping stone I needed. So I ended up teaching there for 12 years. And it became a full-time tenure track job, and I actually got tenure there. And in the meantime, Riggs would still call me once in a while to come up to North Texas and teach in the fall semester, because he'd have an overload of saxophones. And so I was still getting some experience and some exposure teaching there. And then along that line, I started to become a little bit more known professionally in the area and started gigging a little bit more on the side, and with a few uh, invitations sprinkled into sub in the Fort Worth and Dallas symphonies and things like that. So just a slow expansion. And then after 12 years, Bill Snodgrass retired from here, and he knew me from when I taught that year, and every once in a while would contact me about something or come judge his festival or something like that. So he personally called me up when he was going to retire and said, "Hey, are you going to put your paper in for this gig?" And so I did. And I took a chance because it was an 1 year interim position.
Hmm.
But my wife really encouraged me to do it. She said, "Listen, you got to go do this." I said, well, if I take the job, if they hire me, what happens? Because after that they'll have to do a national search, and then what do we? She goes, "Well, we'll just figure that out when you cross that bridge." And it worked. It just worked out. I just very, very blessed and very fortunate.
Yeah. So that's something that, I mean, I was going to say that's not common, I want to say, because things kind of, I don't want to say fell in your lap, right time, right
They,
place.
they did. I just it was the right. His timing was everything.
But it's also your network. And that's an important thing I teach to students, musically or business wise, is that your personal network is the most valuable network out there.
Yes, that's
I've
very
told my
good.
kids almost every job I've received in the corporate America was from personal relationships, people I knew already. They either helped me get the job or stood up for me to recommend me. So personal networking is incredibly important for young students, well, for anyone, and for that matter. You never know who that person next to you in class is going to be down the road. We had no idea that our friend Brad was going to be saxophone professor at North Texas. We had no idea that you'd be a tenured professor at UTA. Or our other friends will be where they are today, or Jeff will be playing with Dave Matthews Band. You never know who that person in class is going to be. So always maintain those friendships, don't burn bridges, network and keep up to date. Now, social media makes it a lot easier to stay up to date than we had it back then. We had to have a little black book and write down numbers, et cetera. But maintaining good relationships, and treating the music business like a business, not just a hobby, is incredibly important. You said about, your family expectation was you're going to do well in school. You're not going to skip class. That was kind of my way as well. So you've got to be disciplined, and you got to hope some things go the right way. If they don't go the right way, you make a reading band instead of a regular band. We'll work harder to get the things that you achieve. So now, fast forward, as I say this as a fellow old man, you've got more than 3 decades of college teaching experience now. And a lot has changed since you got into the college education world. So, based on your 3 decades plus of experience, how has the music world changed with regard to the students that are coming in, the job opportunities that they have in front of them? And how things change, and what do you think it looks like for students in the future?
Well, it's a huge drastic change. I mean, when we were in school at North Texas, Paul, there were still touring big bands.
Right.
I mean, Woody Herman was still touring. Count Basie was out there a lot
Buddy,
more.
Maynard, all those guys.
Even Buddy and Maynard Ferguson, especially, and a lot of students from North Texas came through Maynard's band.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, that all is, as I learned later in life, was all kind of like word of mouth.
Yeah.
Right. A couple of guys from North Texas get on Maynard's band, and they're recommending their guys who are at
When
North
they
Texas.
leave, they recommend their replacement.
Woody
Yeah.
Herman had a lot of guys on from Eastman.
Yeah.
And then in Miami, then those guys. So your network, like you said, your network is incredibly valuable, and
Back then though, there were a lot less music colleges. The new school hadn't started yet. It was like when
right.
my teachers, I said I want to go to major music. He said, okay, you got North Texas, Miami, and Eastman. Those are the big 3. I had a partial scholarship to Berkeley, but they weren't in the top 3 as far as saxophone players went. Other than that, they maybe were a couple other big names. But now you've got a lot more school options. So maybe some things are better for students that want to major in music. There's a lot more music programs today. Would you say that's an accurate assessment?
Not only that, not only are there lots of programs that music programs have, proliferated, but I always thought this when I was graduating from UNT, is that eventually UNT will shoot itself in the foot, because there were guys like you, guys like me, guys like Will, Randy, Glenn, Coffin, and Brent Zavacek, Steve, all these guys going out into the world and getting college teaching gigs.
Yeah.
And they are going to recruit from their local base.
Yeah.
So North Texas is a great program, and it's always going to attract the best. And they've earned that right, and they've developed that right, as some other schools like Eastman and Miami. But yeah, here I am at UT Arlington in the shadow of the giant, so
literally,
to speak.
Yeah.
And still able to sustain a okay jazz program, pretty good. Have a few really good students. We don't have the numbers they have, but but because of the Metroplex and North Texas, I benefited from North Texas. Most of my adjuncts have gone through North Texas. A lot of them are classmates, like from when we were in school. So like again, back to networking with guys and staying in touch, so that when it came time to like tap, I need a jazz drum set player. Who did I call? I called Mike Drake.
Right.
You want to teach, and so he came over, and so forth. But there aren't touring big bands regularly like we used to have. So but big band playing in a large jazz ensemble still is a super valuable experience in the college. So that's kind of where, in my opinion, there are some fantastic professional big bands out there, but on either coast. But it's the heart and soul really is kind of starting to live in the college and high school levels. But you're coming out of school or college, and where do you play? So
yeah,
I see what I do see more as a proliferation or the development of the so-called rehearsal band.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those. People still want to play the music, but it's done in that kind of genre or venue, and but we're not making any money off of it,
So
obviously.
just for those that may not be familiar, a rehearsal band, and the Dallas Jazz Orchestra was, the collection was, it's a band that gets together regularly or semi-regularly, usually a bunch of friends. They've got a book, you're calling charts, you're not practicing. The gig is the rehearsal, hence the name rehearsal band. And you're just playing at a club somewhere. Sometimes you may get called for actual corporate events or true paying gigs, but this is a weekly gathering of various musicians. There's a rotation of subs, etc. And you're going through the book and reading charts, and you can bring a chart in if you want, have the band read it. It's not a formal group with uniforms and things like that. If you got lucky, you got we all have the same shirt on. That would be a good
Right,
big
right,
thing.
right.
So
So
go ahead.
yeah, so there's a lot of that, but I always have thought that there's room in the business playing wise for talent if you're talented
Yeah.
and if you're dedicated and if you want to develop your talent. You'll find a niche, you'll find a place to do it. But again, like you said, I'm not wanting to beat a dead horse, but you have to keep your network going. You got to know people. You have to be willing to drive a little ways to be a part of something, and
Be on time, be professional.
you still have to do all those basic things to succeed in the business, and eventually things will happen. You'll be playing. Yeah, so like I never ever, when I got out of school, played any combo gigs, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Cocktail gigs or lounge gigs or even jazz gigs. I was strictly a big band guy,
Well,
lead alto guy. And over the years, I've just now I it's reversed. I play mostly when I'm gigging, it's mostly in a small group format,
yeah.
and being able to play in a big band is a treat.
Yeah. You
Um,
know, one of the things, like I thought when I was going to go to music college, that I'm going to be doing jam sessions all the time and getting jazz lessons and learning how to improv this. And that really didn't happen for us. Really, the jazz learning was on our own with groups and listening, but the music education was mastering your horn. So the classical literature was really about mastering your instrument, whether you're brass, woodwinds, or whatever. Furling etudes until you die. It was about getting control of that instrument, full range, chromatically, everything. Understanding the literature, the repertoire of your particular instrument. But and then in the jazz world is learning the various decades of jazz, the cool school, the modal jazz, free jazz, bebop, etc. But most of that was on your own, and nor do we learn how to do a society gig or a pop gig or a cover gig. I had a disastrous first gig with Neil Slater, Ed Soph, um, and Mike Steinell on trumpet. They were desperate. It was summertime. Denton was empty. I got the call like the day before the gig. Hey, can you do a wedding? I'm like, sure. I didn't know any standards. Like Mike Steinell calls Chicago. I didn't know Chicago. Why would I know Chicago? Crashed and burned. I'll never forget. We played Giant Steps as a bossa nova just because so it goes older. It was like a wedding reception or something. But there's Ed Soph and Neil Slater and Mike Steinell and then little old me. It was an interesting gig, but I wasn't ready for it, and that hurt me a little bit. So the only way you're going to learn in many cases is baptism by fire. There was a gig I was on. Okay, we're playing A Train. I know that. Okay, do you know the intro? No. He's like, learn it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, so you're going to learn on gigs, and if you don't have the personality for that and the nerves to do that, you're going to struggle. So there's a lot of things you're going to learn in college. There's a whole bunch you learn being around music college, society gigs, cover tunes, pop tunes, Latin tunes, ballroom stuff. There's a lot of stuff you'll have to learn on your own if you want to be successful. Just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're going to make it. You may be able to dunk the basketball, but it doesn't mean you're going to make it in the NBA. So I guess what advice? This is my last question. What advice would you give students and parents, for that matter, that are considering a music degree? Should they even do it? Should they major in something else? Should they go business at a music school? Should they go music school with a business degree? In today's world, it's a tough question, especially as a tenured professor of music. What would you say to folks out there that are considering majoring and paying for a music degree?
Well, first of all, I would say my first response is if you truly are passionate about music, like, and you have to do a little soul searching here. You have to say to yourself, can I live without this?
Hmm,
Now, as a high school kid, that may be hard to answer,
true.
you know, but, you know, okay, so then go to college, pursue a music degree that you think you'll like, and see how it goes for a year. And if it's not everything it's cracked up to be, you still have time to change directions. Okay. Um, know that if you're a performer, it's like you said, it's like being a pro athlete. Getting to the highest echelons, is extremely difficult. Is it impossible? No, but you dedicated enough to put enough time in and get the right kinds of training to reach those levels. Okay. So their commitment. Um, don't discount don't discount education because or being an educator because well, people say, oh, I don't want to be a band director. I know you don't want to be a band director. However, you get to work in the field of music, you get to work with young people, and yeah, there's a lot of BS, so to speak, that goes on. I mean, a lot of it's not about music, but it's a living. I mean,
In music.
in music education, if being some kind of public school educator, band, orchestra, choir, um, you come out of if you graduate from UT Arlington with a four, music eds is usually about 4.5 years because of the student teaching. Your starting salary is 60 plus $1,000. That's, in my opinion, that's okay. First first year first year
Out of
teacher at
college, yeah.
college. Are you kidding? You're making 60 grand and you're at the bottom of the toll. You have room for growth. If you become a head director and move up in schools and bigger schools, so you can make it's a really good living. Now I'm going to say it's a lot of work, but if you love that work and you love being around music and musicians, that's a benefit. you know if you're going to be a performer, um just tell yourself you're going to have to get a DMA, a doctorate. I mean, the masters get you into a ticket into the game to teach like in a junior college or something like that. But so many college positions, tenure track, are asking, depending on the field, the terminal degree that they want you to have is the doctorate,
Well,
PhD, or DMA. And so that's a lot of schooling and a lot of time, and you have a lot of figuring
money.
out to do and money as you work your way through that type of education. Some people take a break, save up their money, then go back, get a job, go back. It just depends, but if it's really what you are called to do, and you're diligent and clever about it, you'll find a way. There's a way to make it happen, and it can happen in so many ways because there's so many that, like you said, the music field is huge. I mean, with social media, if you want to get involved in that, you can do things there that you can monetize that kind of thing. You can get into the business of music. So many things you can, write the writing of music, and so much can be done just in your own home now.
Absolutely. The technology is there to produce yourself.
Yeah.
My side business now is writing music for television and film. And it's music every day. I haven't played live in many years. The occasional jam session here or there, but I have a whole second income stream from music on television. And most of my videos on this channel have been about that. This is a new series. So there's opportunity out there, but it's I like the phrase you use is it's your calling. I never not wanted to be a musician. I knew early on my saxophone was an extension of my body, and
Yeah.
I never questioned. Oh yeah, of course I'm going to go music. Of course I'm going to travel across the country to some place I've never been. Of course I'm not going to make a band, and then, but of course I'm going to work hard to make a band and get better, etc. You got to have the right attitude. Just because it's easy for you, though, doesn't mean you'll be successful. You've got to have the discipline about we talked about earlier about doing the grades, being on time to class, being on time to gigs, acting like a professional at gigs. There's a lot of work involved, but getting the degree, whether it be associates, bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, the degree matters a lot for success. There's also the military side of it,
Yeah.
but with all bands, there's a finite number of them, and once folks are there, they're generally not letting go of those gigs. I think I heard a stat a few years ago that roughly 2/3 of the major military jazz bands are all North Texas folks. Airmen of Note, Commodores, Ambassadors, because that word of mouth thing, that networking thing, trumpet players leaving, hey, I got a friend I could recommend from, my school. So, yeah, it's interesting how that all works. And the network matters a lot. That being said, anything new? I mean, you've got 3 decades. Are you going to retire soon? Are you going to be doing this for a long time more? What's life looking like the future for Tim Ishii?
Well, good question.
You just like what you're doing, you keep doing it?
I used to tell a friend of mine, with my finances, I'm going to die on the bandstand.
I'm right there with you, my friend.
No. I mean, I'm not going to do this forever. Obviously, nobody can, but I still love doing it.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's going to be part of the equation. But I'm getting up there. I've been doing it a long time. So, and the landscape is changing, to be very honest. I mean, in academia, the landscape is changing. There's a lot more. It's not like it used to be. I mean, there just seems to be more administrative work to be done, for, assessment and things like that. Those are big things in higher ed now. And so, it's not just, hey, let's just show up and teach and inspire these kids. There's so much that goes on,
and more complicated.
It's just more complicated to do. The world's a different place, and so, but it's still a great job. I love it. I wouldn't change it. And I would, like you said, I never would have imagined that being in the music field, especially in academia, that it's literally taken me around the world. I've been all over the world and teaching music, and specifically jazz. So it's great. It's not for everybody. I wished it was for everybody. I encourage everybody to explore this music because of the types of influences that have all the genres that have influenced jazz, and how jazz is, it's kind of this great conduit for music of all styles and genres. And I really in a way think it's very healthy, to explore other styles and things like that. So I want to thank you for having me. I mean, just
it's been a lot of fun. I'm sorry it went so long, but man, you had a lot to say.
It's great chatting about music, and for those of you out there who think you want to be in music, I mean, the world needs good musicians all the time, and
music world is quiet.
That's right.
It's how it is.
I mean, this sounds silly, but think about this world without music. And so, and it can come in so many forms and fashions these days that I just wish everybody who pursues it success. And if you're diligent, clever about it, and serious, you'll find a way to make it work for you.
Tim Ishii, University of Texas Arlington, thank you so much, my friend, for being with me this hour, and I look forward to chat with you sometime soon.
My pleasure.